MP Chambers for the first four plus minutes. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I appreciate the testimony from our witnesses here today. I think it's been an excellent panel. I did provide notice of a motion to the clerk, which has been distributed, so I would like to move that motion now, Mr. Chair. That the committee hold no less than 4 meetings devoted to a pre-study of the Ways and Means motion introduced in the House of Commons on June 10th, 2024. That is the capital gains Ways and Means motion. That at least 1 meeting be held prior to June 25th, and that witnesses may be submitted by each party prior to Friday, that would be tomorrow, at 5 p.m. Mr. Chair, we've heard from some witnesses today some very important testimony about the impact of this on, in particular, landlords. There is obviously some misunderstanding of the impact of these these new tax rules, such that the government, in an effort to start a class war, has made a mistake. They don't understand, actually, that it's landlords, self-employed individuals who incorporate individuals of modest incomes that will actually be paying this tax or affected by this tax. In fact, StatsCan data indicates that those individuals who have $250,000 of capital gains, excuse me, or more in 1 year, is almost always a once or twice in lifetime event. That is, data shows, for example, in 2011, of the individuals who claimed capital gains taxes increases in excess of $250,000, that 2/3 of those individuals never ever were in that group again. And so the government is correct that 0.13% of tax filers are in this group. The problem is it's almost a new 0.13% of tax filers every single year, such that over 50 or even 75 years, the number of tax filers affected by this tax change are millions of Canadians. It is not the same 40,000 people each year that have capital gains in excess of $250,000. And so I think the government's made a fairly large mistake. I think they recognize that. That's why it's a Ways and Means motion and not final legislation, because I think they're considering making carve-outs. And so in an effort to help the government with its legislative agenda, Conservatives are willing to pre-study legislation. I'll note that that is not normally a practice of ours, but we think we deserve, or frankly, stakeholders deserve, to have their voices heard. And we know a number of them who have come out publicly to say they have challenges with the current legislation. So if the government's considering amendments, then perhaps this committee would be able to offer that opportunity to have witnesses provide their testimony. And one quick other point, 50% of those individuals who have in excess of 250,000 capital gains in 1 year, almost 50% of them have otherwise income of less than $120,000. These are modest incomes. In fact, 10% of those individuals have incomes of less than $20,000. So we think we should study this. We think we should give witnesses an opportunity. We'd like to take the time to do that on Tuesday next week, Mr. Chair. And frankly, Conservatives would be open to amendments of this motion to increase the number of meetings before June 25th. Of course, that's the date that this is supposed to take effect. And we would also be open to hearing from the minister herself for up to 2 hours. But I'll note that the motion as it stands right now does not include those things. But if someone would like to make an amendment to those effect, Conservatives would definitely support that amendment. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
MP Chambers, I do have a speaking order here. So I've got MP Lawrence, then I've got PS Turnbull, MP Howland, MP Morantz.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and I'll just reiterate a couple of comments by my colleagues. One is that Conservatives would be very open to even additional sittings before we rise to get on record some important testimony with respect to the capital gains. Further, we would definitely like to hear from the Minister of Finance with respect to the capital gains tax. She's certainly been outspoken in the media, but I'll just go back and reiterate a couple of their comments. This legislation was clearly rushed. There's actually some, or I should say, motion was clearly rushed out the door, as there are actually considerable errors in it, including with respect to the calculation of the capital dividend account. As more and more professionals look at it, they see the errors, like simple errors, that this government has made by rushing this motion, even though they had a couple months to get it sorted. And it's clear that the Bloc have also realized perhaps the error of their ways in voting for this initially, perhaps certainly because of great stakeholders like we heard from today of the impact of the capital gains inclusion rate. We believe that considerable study needs and just to build is needed. And just to build also on my colleague Mr. Chambers' excellent comment, I'll put it a little bit more crudely than because I'm not quite as eloquent as Mr. Chambers, but the reality is that only 1% of Canadians will die each year. But in the end, 100% of us will pass away. And that is the analogy I would use here, that it may only be a relatively small portion in any given year. But as Mr. Chambers said, given a long enough time, nearly all Canadians will be affected by the capital gains inclusion increase, whether directly or indirectly. So I look forward to particularly see what my colleagues from the Bloc and NDP have to say with respect to this motion. But it's relatively rare that an opposition party would move to a pre-study of government legislation. But we definitely see that there is an opportunity, in fact, I would say a need to discuss this further. And once again, I would reiterate Mr. Chambers' comments that Conservatives would be very open to additional meetings before we rise to it's, what are we at today? We are at the 13th. By the 25th, Canadians will have to decide whether they sell their property, sell their assets, realize the existing capital gains inclusion rate of 50%, or wait until after the date of the 25th. And so I think time is of the essence, and we owe it to Canadians to give them a better understanding of the capital gains tax increase, and so that they can understand and decide their affairs more fittingly. In fact, the limited time is unfair in itself, but at the very least, we owe the Canadian public more of ability to hear from witnesses and testimony about the impact of the increase in the inclusion of the capital gains tax. At this point, I will pass on the floor. Thank you.